everybody. We are getting ready to get started with a conversation called MS, with a dialogue, with a program tonight that's called MS Conversations Now, Patients' Voices. And this is something that during the early days of COVID, I just said, wow, it's so important for us to listen to MS patients and hear what they have to say and what they're doing in life, especially for those that are doing something that benefits the MS community. So tonight we have me. Okay, that everybody knows already. And by the way, I'm very relaxed tonight. You see, I got short sleeves on. Oh my gosh. No tie, no jacket, no button-down shirt. Well, I got a button down, but short sleeve button down, all right? All right, we're taking it easy tonight. We're here tonight to speak with Jessica Thomas, who's a social worker. She's a licensed clinical social worker. And, wow, Jessica has multiple sclerosis. And we're going to talk to Jessica tonight about this and about, well, we're going to hear what she has to say, and then maybe we'll have more questions. I'll have questions. So we're going to get started. First off, hello, Jessica. How are you?
Hi, Stuart. I am doing good tonight. I am casual too, just like you. Just a nice summer evening here.
Great, great. It's summer evening. I don't even know. I couldn't even call South Florida a normal summer anymore. It's been like an oven, like an incubator down here lately. It's, I mean, every day we have these heat warnings where the humidity index is going to like 110 degrees every day. It's just crazy, crazy, crazy. So anyway, I wanted to ask you things about you, things about your personal life and your professional life. So tell us, though, what matters to you both personally and professionally. We'll get started with that, and then we'll go to the next one.
Perfect. So what matters to me on a personal level is my family. That I am able to enjoy and do as much as I can with them. It's changed a little bit now. I have a son who's a teenager now, so it's a little bit different. But back in the day, early on when he was young, just what really mattered to me is really just being a good mom. And I'm still a good mom now. It's just it looks a little bit different now that he's a teenager. And then I would say professionally, what matters to me, except as I've grown in my professional world, really just making sure that I'm helping people navigate living with disease. I think that probably matters to me the most, and especially figuring out how to balance the emotions of the disease. When I was diagnosed, there wasn't much that was available to address the emotional aspects of living with MS.
Wow. So your son, you just said he's a teenager. I remember when he was a little baby. I mean, I remember him being tucked away in a stroller somewhere as you were presenting for us in South Carolina. And wow, I didn't think it was that long ago, but evidently it was. Speaking about your son and speaking about your multiple sclerosis, how helpful has he been with the process?
So, it's all he's known is I had my son Jacob a couple years after my diagnosis. And so all that he's ever known is his mom to have MS. And he has grown up with me helping other people and kind of seeing all sorts of different versions of what MS looks like. And, because my disease is pretty invisible most of the time. And so, finding ways that, early on, I've just adapted a little bit, early on figuring out ways to explain fatigue to him and how could he be helpful? Well, he could be helpful by letting me nap or letting me rest. He could be helpful in that sense. As he's become a teenager, it's a little bit trickier. I'm going to be human here. Having a teenager is fun, but also like he's not super motivated sometimes. So, so we have to. He's actually taken over mowing the grass, which has been pretty big and very helpful this summer. It's probably been one of the biggest movements in our family dynamic for MS management this summer. But just, continuing to have conversations about MS and how it impacts me. It's not the feature in my household, but it is super important to talk about it because my disease is pretty invisible otherwise.
Sure, thank you for that. So let me go back and jump around a few things. First off, I want to let people know again, this is an MS Conversations Now Patients Voices program. It's about speaking with people with multiple sclerosis who are doing things for themselves and doing things for others in the MS community. In this case, Jessica works a lot with MS Views and News, so I had to get to her eventually, right? We've had so many people online already, and I had to get around to having Jessica here as well. So I just want to let everybody know a little bit about that background. And for those that don't know, that are online and don't know that I also have MS, I also have MS. I've been living with mine for over 25 years. So that brings me to my next question for you. How long have you had MS?
So this year will be 18 years of living with MS, and how I know is because my husband and I were newlyweds when I was diagnosed, and we celebrate our 19th anniversary this year. So I always take whatever year that we've been married, and I deduct one, and that means the years that I've been living with MS.
Gosh, when you get older, if you start forgetting, you're in trouble.
I know.
That's right.
But I was 26 years old, and so fairly young. We were newly married, so just a point in my life where I thought, I had my whole future ahead of myself, and I still did. But getting diagnosed with MS was really tough. My first gut feeling was I felt bad for my husband. I felt guilty for him, that he was now married to someone that would have a illness. There was no way to predict how I would feel or look right now. So all I knew is what I knew what MS looked like back then.
Right.
And so I felt really bad and guilty. And then because I was in graduate school and I was working full time, I had a lot of anxiety about the diagnosis as well. Just what was life going to look like? And all of a sudden I realized, oh, I'm not in control of everything.
Okay, so how have you lived your mess? I mean, how have you made it to be more functional?
So one of the very first things that I did is I was very anxious, and that was not functional. My anxiety was very unmanaged. So one of the first things I did was to go see a therapist and to process the idea of living with MS. I did some traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, and that was really helpful to just manage the anxiety that I was feeling. But ultimately, I needed to process kind of the feeling of loss that I had and the grief that I had with the diagnosis. And then after that, after I dealt with some of the anxiety, I did what I thought was the best thing to do, which was slowly educate myself. Now, I have a very interesting spin in my story because the MS Society was hiring a social worker during this period of time. And so I went on to work with the National MS Society. And so from there, I started to get really good information, get good education. I learned about MS Views and News actually back then as well. It's my first exposure. But I started to learn about all the resources and get to see that, while I didn't know what my future would be like, and I still don't know right now what it will be like 30 years from now, 20 years from now, that I was able to learn that I could live well with MS, that I could still do things, that there were different parts of me that I was not MS just in myself. But had that job from the National MS Society not been open, it probably would have taken a little bit longer for me. But I started going to educational programs, patient education programs, which was very helpful. I dragged my husband along with me. And my goal was really to just lean in and get education and information.
Sure, thank you for that. What does emotional wellness mean to you? Since you're on this topic right now of that, I wanted to ask you that now.
So to me, emotional wellness means balance. When you have a disease with MS, and of course, I do some stuff with MS Views and News, and it's related to mental health. But and I talk about this in the program, but I just shared I have anxiety, and I've had anxiety. My anxiety is managed, but I have anxiety like I have brown eyes, I guess, at this point. And it's common when you're living with MS to have depression or anxiety, and so it's more common than uncommon. And so for me, emotional wellness is that we're looking at your emotions, how your mental health is, and really creating a sense of balance. Life is stressful with or without MS, and so how can we make your day to day or my day to day as easy and as balanced as possible, where I'm not interrupted by emotions.
Okay. Well, that brings up another topic. So when you choose the topics to do for the Wellness Chat series that you are doing with us, are any of these because of things that you're actually going through, or things that you're going through with patients that you might be working with that you then come up with the idea to choose to do that kind of program for many?
So it's a blend, really. I would say that it comes from the participants in the MS Mental Wellness Chat, because it's quite a community, and I ask them often, "What is it that you want to talk about? Let's talk about this." The other things I think of themes. Themes when I'm working with patients. Collectively, I can see in the MS Mental Wellness Chat, as well as when I'm individually working with patients, themes that they're experiencing. It just so happens that sometimes I have a personal experience or two with some of these themes as well. And regardless, I have MS, so I do have that connection too. But I also do focus on programs based on when I talk about anxiety, because I know anxiety is something that impacted my life to a great deal. And I know it impacts other people too. The moment I bring it up in the mental wellness chat, people start chatting about it, so I use my experiences to help me help others. But I would say it's a blend of how I come up with the topics.
So elaborate a little bit on that topic that you just said, that when you bring it up in a wellness chat, that people just start shouting about it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Okay. So with the MS Mental Wellness Chat, there's a different feature in this program where we use the question box as or sort of the chat box, I say, but it's really the question box. And I might ask someone a question. I might ask how they're doing, or I might ask them, has anyone felt guilty when they've had a high amount of fatigue? And then all of a sudden, people will start writing in, I feel guilty when I'm not able to do this, or I feel guilty when I'm not able to do that. Some people will say, I feel guilty, but this is what I do to manage it. And so ultimately, what we're doing is we're connecting. I'm making sure that I'm reading out what people are putting, and then we kind of talk about, okay, so we can normalize that this is very common for everybody. Now, what do we do about it? What are some suggestions? And so I use clinical tools and strategies based on my education and my experience, my background. But then I also want to pull in the experts, people living with the disease, and what are they doing that's working too?
Thank you. Has working, therefore, then with people with MS, has it shaped anything different for you?
Absolutely. It has. I would say in some ways it's given me a little push to make sure I walk the walk, the talk that I'm talking, and it also has kept me very relevant and engaged in education and information. But I also I think that I've learned a lot from people that I've worked with too. I've learned strategies that have been helpful for myself. As well as it has kind of shaped me to know that this journey of helping people with dealing with and coping with the emotional aspects of the disease is something that is my purpose at this point, and needs to continue to be done. We are not done with this.
Good. I was just going to ask you, how did your diagnosis impact your own mental health? Can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. So I mentioned, that I was 26 years old. I was when I was newly diagnosed. I was newly married. And I had this sense in my life, and many of us, we've had challenges when we were younger, and I felt like I was building this life that I really wanted, and it was looking exactly how I wanted it to look. And then here came MS. And all of a sudden, what I thought I was building, that I could predict what it would look like, I wasn't sure. And the idea of that really did jolt me quite a bit. And that's when I welcomed general anxiety into my life a little bit. And so a lot of my anxiety, while it started based on optic neuritis and driving in the car, it kind of became that I didn't drive on the highway for 2 years and my eyes were better. I just wasn't. I was so anxious. And so, having MS really did impact my mental health. It made, when my anxiety was that high, I would say that I was not as functional as I am now, and as I was before. And so I've been, I've taken that very seriously, and I've worked very hard on my management of my anxiety over the years. And but I think it's something I'll continue to deal with. Sometimes I like to say that when you're first diagnosed, it's like this: MS is like in your face, and it's all you can see. And I think my anxiety was like that too. Is all I could see was, MS, and I didn't know what it was going to look like. And then over the years, I was able to shift it and move it, but it's still there. It's kind of like my MS. So my MS is here and my anxiety is here. So if my MS flares up a little bit, it comes back a little bit forward, and so does my anxiety. So if I've had relapses in the past, and that's happened. When I have to make a treatment change, I notice my anxiety will spike a little bit. I'll manage it and work on it. And but I've learned that, yes, MS impacts my mental health, and I can see it kind of fluctuate.
Thank you for that. I want to just add in, when I was diagnosed almost over 25 years ago, that I remember having such severe cognitive problems from it that I would get in the car and go to leave my office and go to drive home, which was only supposed to be a 25-minute ride. Yet I would realize an hour later that I'm 2 counties further away than where I needed to be, and I just forgot to get off the highway. And this would happen a lot. I mean, it's just not that I was daydreaming, it's just that I was actually forgetting where I needed to go. I had problems getting from one lane to another lane, and that then turned into fear about putting on my signal light to have to go to another lane. So, some of us are diagnosed with things that all of a sudden you start adapting to the things that they tell you should have, but that you really don't have. So that being said, how do you help people that address these issues with you, and what do you do to help them get past those issues?
So earlier I was listening to a conversation about a chicken and an egg. What comes first, right? And so I think that's a valuable thing. It's, because MS touches things, and then MS doesn't touch everything, and other things are going to happen too. And how can you when do you give MS the star to be the star of all the symptoms and not? I think it's all about balance. So helping people to find ways to adjust to whatever symptoms they are experiencing, but then also, what are they contributing to those symptoms? What are they doing to contribute to that? So if I don't sleep well, I'm contributing to having cognitive fatigue. I'm contributing to my fatigue in general, and I'm contributing to maybe my anxiety or moodiness. So 4 things can happen if I don't sleep well. But if I sleep well, I can manage those much better. Am I still going to have fatigue? Yes, in North Carolina in the summer, I will. So it's helping people to kind of navigate the cause and effect. Some symptoms are going to have regardless of their disease. Some symptoms, they have some control, helping people find some of the areas of control that they have within their own disease and giving them some power in that as well.
Put a 3-pound boot on your leg and see how you sleep when you're told you have to sleep with it on.
Probably not good. Probably not good. When I was pregnant, I couldn't sleep on my tummy, and I didn't sleep good at all.
For those that see me shifting my chair or talking about this big boot, I fractured my leg in 2 spots. And so it's uncomfortable, yes, and it's very difficult to sleep. So going forward, we'll end it with that. What is important for people to know about you and your multiple sclerosis? I mean, you've spoken about a lot. I still have more things to ask you, but I wanted to ask you that as well.
I said this in the last mental wellness chat. I had a picture of a bee when I was doing my introductions, and it was a cute little bumblebee. And I said, I look like a busy bee. I speak a lot. I work full time. I am a mom, a wife, I do a lot. And I think at face value, that can look like I'm doing a lot. And the truth is that in these settings, like in this setting, Stuart, you're getting the best of me. When I'm working most of the time, they're getting the best of me. I'll take naps, etc. So I think one of the important things is to, I think at face value, it's important to know that I do have MS. It may not look the same as everyone's MS, but I have symptoms that I deal with daily, and I'm not different in that aspect at all. I'm just figuring out how to manage them. But I do feel like in the light that people see me, they get my good energy, so they may not feel like I have MS sometimes.
Okay, thank you for that. Hey, for everybody online, if you have any questions for Jessica, just type it in. I mean, I shouldn't have to tell you that where to go to find the question bar, what you have to click on, but it's that red or orange box at the top of the screen, and just type what you want. If you have something to ask her, please type it in. If you have something to tell her about what she's talking about, if it relates to yourself, talk about it, right? Don't just be there letting it all happen going on by you. If you have something to say, please say it. All right, next, Jessica, why did you go into the helping field, counseling and patient education for people living with chronic diseases?
So early on in my MS diagnosis, I went to see a counselor. And what I didn't tell you is that it was really difficult to find a counselor. Very difficult. I could not find a single counselor that specialized in MS, let alone chronic disease. And I found that to be a little bit discouraging because I knew I wanted to talk to someone that would understand MS, but if anything, just understand chronic disease and kind of what I had in terms of my future. And so when I started to become more educated on MS, I realized there wasn't a lot of resources out there for the emotional wellness piece. We're seeing them now, thank heavens, but back then, no, we weren't seeing it. And so as I continued to work in the MS field at the National MS Society, I kept seeing just this hole that there needed to be a resource, a place, a clinician, mental health therapist that really specialized in the MS field or in chronic disease. And so I decided ultimately to go out to be a therapist. I have since have moved on. I am doing some patient education. I'm very passionate about patient education and the emotional aspects. But I eventually will probably do some therapy again in the future because there's still a hole. It's getting better.
Okay, thank you for that. What are some of the healthy habits you have? What are some that you would like to improve on?
Okay. So I'm human here, just like everyone else. And so, I have periods of time where I'm rocking it with exercise or I'm really motivated in one area. And that may be seasonal because in the fall I have a lot more energy. In the winter I have more energy. So in the summer, redefining exercise and what it looks like is something that I'm always working on because exercise is something that helps your mood and helps your body. It's really great for MS in general. And so that's something that I find myself, it's a consistent thing. I took a walk today, but I do like exercise in general, and I think that's important. A healthy habit that I do practice every single day, though, one that I think is good, is gratitude. And so I am always looking for the good. So I am paying a lot of attention to the small little good things that are happening around me because life is tough and having MS is tough. Life can be stressful. And so I'm always looking to capture little things and I write them down.
Sure, thank you. Question, are you open with others about your MS outside of us right here? I mean, talking about your friends that live by you, that you go out with maybe, that's your family and etc. Are you open with them as you are with us?
Yes, I am. I actually, in all aspects of my world, I'm open about my disease. For example, so I was traveling this week. I got back in town on Sunday morning at around 11 o'clock, but that meant that I left Boston at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was a long day. Went to a family party. And guess who slept the whole party? Me. And so guess who communicated to her whole entire extended family that she was really tired? Me. So yes, I my disease sometimes doesn't even give me space where I had to talk about it in that case. But no, I'm very open with my family, my friends, when I'm making treatment decisions on a day-to-day basis. On a bigger scale, I have decided early on that every job I have interviewed for since my diagnosis, I've been honest about my disease. And the reason why is I want to work with an employer that would, one, value that I have MS and not look at it as a deficit, but more than anything, that they would see that there's some strength to it, because usually the types of jobs that I'm applying for are jobs that are helping other people live with their disease. And so I don't want to be afraid to acknowledge that I have one as well.
Do you ever worry about being rejected by anybody?
Early on in my one of the saddest things that happened early on in my diagnosis is I had a good friend who did not show up to be a good friend at first during my diagnosis period, and that was really hard. So yeah, I think the one thing is you can't untell people, and MS can help to eliminate the people that are going to be positive in your life and the people that maybe are not going to be positive or not be patient, not be understanding. But yeah, no, I have been rejected in that sense.
Okay. Now that you're 18 years into your diagnosis, what do you wish that you could go back and tell yourself if you could do that?
So there's this thing called hindsight bias. And hindsight bias is that idea that I could have, I wish I did, etc. When in actuality, we do the best we could do at the time with the information, resources, and everything that we have. But for the sake of this question, because I think it's an important one, if I could go back to that 26-year-old young lady who was so anxious about her disease, I would tell her to read and educate herself, that she didn't have to know what chapter 100 looked like for MS to stay in whatever chapter, maybe a couple chapters ahead, if that makes sense, but she didn't have to go to 100 and stay there. That she would be able to do all the things that she wanted to do. That it would be a disease that would progress. My symptoms are worse than they were when I was first diagnosed, but it wouldn't hold me back. I wish I wouldn't have been as anxious had I known those things. So that's what I would tell myself.
Okay, thank you for that. Have you found that any food groups, it was just asked to me, have any food groups have made you more efficient?
So I have learned this. I learned it at watch MS Views and News, and there's really good information. And I learned something from one of the presenters at a program recently, but then I'll tell you something else I learned. That Megan was really great to follow and get some information, because really nutrition should be very simple and easy for us. But I'll tell you what, the one thing that someone said that made so much sense to me, and this is very relatable to my MS and how I make decisions, and I make bad decisions sometimes. So one of the things I heard was, when you eat junk, you feel like junk. That's very true for me. So if I choose to eat like junk, then I'm going to kind of feel like junk. And that means it affects my energy level, my, GI system. Like I don't feel as good or energetic. So I tend to know if I eat a little bit better, I feel better. So I'm mindful of that, but I'm not perfect. So I want to note that as well. And I think being open-minded to look at resources to help you to eat better is important, and to keep that conversation going with your doctor and your healthcare team.
Okay, thank you. Jessica, the divorce rate is very high with multiple sclerosis and other chronic illnesses and chronic disease. How does MS fit into your marriage? And does your husband ever feel guilty about anything that's going on with you?
Those are good questions. One of my very early memories of attending a MS Consortium, I sat in on a program that I had learned a little bit about the divorce rate for people living with MS. And I realized the divorce rate is really high in general, but it is really high when you add in a chronic disease. And so I remember calling my husband from my hotel room that night, and I said, I need to tell you this because it's really important. And I think that that began the foundation of kind of how we approach and talk about and work with my MS. MS is, definitely, it's a part of my marriage. It's not all of my marriage, and there's many other layers to my marriage besides MS. But I like to say that he carries some burden of my MS because when Jacob was younger, he did a lot of the getting Jacob ready in the morning. He did all the evening feedings. When my son was a baby, he did. Everything up to 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I did anything 4 o'clock and beyond. And that was so I could manage my fatigue. And so we have kind of approached my MS in the sense of, what can he do to support it? But then we've also have been, very clear that when I don't need that support, that I don't ask for it either. So it's a push and pull. I don't think he feels guilty. I don't think he's ever felt guilty. Maybe he might, feel bad sometimes, but he's also seen all the good things that have come out in terms of helping other people and some of the energy I've been able to get through helping. But I don't think I, but I think I've experienced sadness in him when I was diagnosed, and I experienced sadness when I had a relapse that, it was hard. We had to recover, together from, and I've experienced a little bit of sadness or concern when I've had to make treatment decisions.
Okay. What do you recommend for other couples that are in the MS space? And what do you recommend to couples who both have multiple sclerosis?
Okay. So, what I learned, my husband broke his foot. This will be relevant in a second. He broke his foot a year and a half ago. And what I realized is that my husband's not immune from things happening to him too. And one time he lost a job, during COVID, and I remember telling him, "This is like your MS." And so there's things that are going to be occurring in your life and in your partner's life that they're going to have to show up, and showing up for each other and figuring out how to work together is important. So for so much time, the focus, for my husband, I had MS, but then he had things that have happened too, and I've had to be the supporter. I think it's important to consider counseling if you want to strengthen your communication, or go to some of the couples programs. Find ways for MS to be a part of your relationship and not the center of your relationship. I think for me, that's, really important. If you both have MS, which would be a very rare thing, but it will not be rare that you both might have something. I've had a friend that she had MS, her husband had Parkinson's disease. That there's been two diseases within the family. And I think, that your diseases don't compete. You're there to support each other and to help one another, and helping is the emotional helping, and sometimes it's the physical helping, but just like any relationship, kind of showing up and bringing yourself there and working together.
Okay, thank you. I only have a few questions remaining. So again, for anybody that's online with us, if you have any questions for Jessica or want to add to anything that she has said, please type it in. Okay, next. I have, what was your training process to work with specifically with the MS community?
So a lot of the training process that I had in the very beginning was that I was working solely with people living with MS, and my clinical supervisor had experience in working with hospice, which also had some chronic disease embedded within it as well in that program. So I did that, and then I also worked with the ALS Association. I made sure that I was working with people living with disease in general. Now, the National MS Society has a program called Partners in MS Care, and so while I was working fully with people living with MS, I also made sure that I enrolled into that program. I also did some work in an MS multidisciplinary clinic, and any opportunity that I could have to work with MS patients, I did.
Okay, thank you for that. Would you change anything if you could about anything that you've done or anything that you see coming in the near future?
I would
Aside from
during
politics.
I know. During COVID, I was doing therapy full time, and I really did love, and I specialized in therapy for people with chronic disease. But COVID was a very special time for our community as a whole, and I found that I got very burned out in the end, not from working with chronic disease, but just the general weight of my workload of that period of time in my life. And so what I would have done differently is I would have set boundaries because I really do love that work. So I may see that I'll do that work again part-time someday. I'm a director of patient education right now, and I'm very busy in the work that I'm doing, so I don't have the space for it. But I do miss the personal connections with MS patients.
Okay, thanks. The last question I have for you is, what is your favorite part of leading the MS Views and News Mental Wellness Chat series?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So if you can just see, I just light up now talking and just thinking about it. So the MS Views and News, the MS Mental Wellness Chat came at a really unique time. It was during COVID when a lot of us were very isolated, and we needed mental health resources, and we needed connection more than anything. Little did I know that this would really become a community. It has become a community of people that attend month to month to month. I know names. I know, I have a great memory. That's something to know about me, is I remember things really well. But people show up every month, and they are helpful. They are real. They allow themselves to be vulnerable, which is important, because if we're not vulnerable, then we won't be able to connect, because we know that life is hard sometimes. And if someone says, I'm feeling fatigued today, or my mood has been off, then someone else might feel brave enough to connect with that. And so what I've seen is it's built a community, and we're almost 3 years into it, which is crazy, like 2.5 years maybe at this point.
More.
Oh my goodness. Like it just, I love this program, and I love the people that come to it, and they show up, and they help one another. You may only be able to hear me verbally talking during this program, but you don't feel alone because you hear everybody else. Everyone has a voice in it, and participates. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. So we are in our third year of that, actually. It started in 2020 to 21. Is 1 to 22 to 23 so we're in our third year of that already. It's hard to imagine. I have a question that has nothing to do with the topics for tonight, but what is everybody doing with all those damn masks that we had? I want to know if I should start making rodent hammocks.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what I'm doing with mine coming up. I'm, planning to wear mine a little bit this fall, because I think that, we're seeing a little bit of an uptake in COVID. So when I have actually a busy traveling season this fall, and I also have the MS treatment that kind of knocks my immune system. So that will be a first for me. So I will be bringing back the mask just for me for the fall season. But if you guys have any creative things that you're doing, please share with Stuart. I do have a surplus of masks, so I'm only going to be using a small amount.
I think that I'm going to have somebody make a quilt with all of mine.
Perfect.
There you go. All right, Jessica, I want to thank you very much for being online with us tonight. We are a little bit shorter in time than we're expected to be, but we got a lot of great information out of you, and I'm glad that you accepted to be on here with me tonight. And I'm just going to say good night to everybody. Done.
I hope everybody has a good evening, and continue to share your story with other people and connecting.
Thank you. Good night.